So again, welcome everyone to our call showcasing the amazing work of Youth by Youth. So happy to have uh, both of you here, Valentina and Zineb. And you have one more colleague, right, who co-founded the network with you. Um,
Yes. Arielua Adeyinka. Yes.
Not here with us today, but two out of three ain't bad, as they say. Um, and this is the first, I think, of the first call where since we started this weaving and mapping work in Cofundico, where we're showcasing a particular call for resourcing from one of the groups or individuals that are on our social system map. And so we're kind of experimenting. We don't have a part of the whole approach to Cofundico in general, and especially to this weaving and mapping, is we're not trying to figure out everything in advance. We're just doing some things where there's a call and there's some energy and seeing what wants to flow as a result of that. And so this just organically happened where Valentina, you and I were speaking a few weeks ago, maybe even a little more than that now, I don't know, um, about showcasing youth by youth and calls for funding and other support that you're making. And then the idea of having a call to celebrate you really is what I think we want to do. This isn't about you trying to persuade anybody of how great you are. We're coming in just assuming and knowing and trusting that. And that's the spirit with which we're approaching all of this resourcing to say, you know, yeah, due diligence is important and being discerning about what we want to support is important. And the way we can do that is often simply just because of the quality of the relationships we have. Even if we don't know someone really well, I've spent time with both of you and but not a lot. But the quality has always been there and just this instant sense that I get very often, of these are beautiful, amazing people doing badass shit out in the world and they need to be really well resourced if there's any way we can help that to happen. So that's our job here to celebrate you and without promising that we know what kind of resourcing, might flow from this to hold the possibility that it could be, quite an abundant flow in time, sometime in the coming year. Thanks for being here doing this.
Thanks for having us and inviting this conversation around resourcing and and co-creating funding ecosystems with and for youth, which we would love to definitely dive into with all of you. This is a bit of a, brain trust think tank, heart work, however we want to call it. And I will share some context about Youth by Youth first, because I think it's helpful to kind of understand how we are cultivating ecosystems. Though funding ecosystems is definitely a learning edge for us. And so that's been really what drew me to connect more with Ben and learn more about what is this Cofundico and idea, but also really looking at how we regeneratively resource um, young people in particular, but all people who are really stepping into this work of transforming education and communities and for in service of people and planet. And it's not easy. And right now there's a lot of risks to livelihoods, especially when you live already on the margins. And so we'll talk a deeper about that and how Youth by Youth is trying to bridge those gaps. But before we dive in, I would love to invite us to be fully here and present with three breaths, which is for all of us, but also for me to arrive here before diving into this. So if you feel comfortable, keeping your feet on the ground with your back straight and close your eyes, either or look gently at your hands and take a deep breath in with me through your nose and out through your mouth. And two more breaths, deepening in and out. And last one in and an audible breath out. Thanks. I invite you to share any questions, interrupt me anywhere, things on your mind that I can, as I'm just giving this brief intro to who Youth by Youth is and what we do and why we do it. And then we'll deep dive into some of those discussion questions so that we can co-learn and co-create. I'm gonna share my screen here, and you can give me a thumbs up that it's working for you. Cool. That's great to hear. And Z, you can help me out if anyone drops anything in the chat. Just interrupt me. Youth by Youth began in 2020 at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic with a burning question. What if young people designed the future of education? Since then, we've grown into a youth-led, adult-supported learning community of youth activists and adult allies who are together working to reimagine and transform education. And we do this not alone, but in an interconnected web of partners at local, regional, and global levels that are working with the young people in our community to create those transformations in service of people and planet. And we do that across the globe, across 80 countries, with predominantly young people based in the global south, 75% of whom are living and working or studying there. And the reason why this is where we have begun our focus is from our origin story when Zeneb and I were in our previous roles at global organizations that were talking and going into these conferences about transforming education and putting youth at the center. We were often the only young people in that room, and often the only people with identities from the global south, with my roots in India and Zeneb's roots from Morocco. And also we found that in these conversations about systems change, we often neglected to have grassroots and community-based leaders in those conversations. And so Youth by Youth was born to bridge those gaps that were inhibiting the transformation of education, and as well as address the roots of the oppressions and harms we were seeing in education that really continued from a colonial system of really bringing in knowledge and a framework and from the global north to create education systems in the global south, and removing the more indigenous wisdom and knowledges that we also were seeing was essential to uplift once again in the space of education and beyond, to create the transformations we wish to see, and how that was affecting young people everywhere in terms of mental health, climate change, etc., that these dynamics were perpetuating these harms. So that's why we really wanted to first and foremost create a community that could help to bridge those youth and adults, global south, global north, and grassroots and system leaders. And we believe if we do that, we can create a youth-led, adult-supported revolution of education, where a young person wherever they are, no matter where they come from, can reclaim their learning and act as conscious activists, really connecting that inner and outer transformation within a global community of care, practice, and belonging that's alongside also adult allies. And which is why that intergenerationality is so essential to the core, and why all of our work is intergenerational nature, even if we are putting youth in the lead of that transformation. And we believe if we do that, we'll create a world where learning serves everyone, us, our communities, and the planet. How we do that is through our programs, which are interconnected they're not in isolation of one another, but really a continuous learning journey that you could flow through across a 2 year span and then continue to cycle through even as you grow into an adult ally and then position yourself in a different way. And even adults participate in all these programs. And this learning journey usually begins with most people at our annual learning festival. We have our fifth one in January, which would be lovely to have you all. This is a pretty big milestone and happening January 24th to 25th. And this is really our big catalytic moment where all of our community partners, people come together to really exchange knowledge and collaborate intergenerationally in education. And then from there, a lot of our young people flow into either our Weavership, which is a 10-month fellowship program for building the capacity of youth weavers, which, that really is trying to build the capacity of more young people to hold spaces like the ones you described, Kate, that of the young person that inspires you, of really holding those spaces of belonging, inclusion, and weaving across these divisions of disciplines, geographies, differences, and to create that transformation. We also have our Global Action Circles, which is a 5-month project accelerator, if you will, that young people and adult allies come in with a learning question around a common theme. And as a cohort of 10 to 12 people go through a learning journey to develop concrete projects in their local and global communities. And then we have in-person local hubs that I'll describe a little bit what those look like in a moment. And then a lot of youth-led projects and allyships. So we don't talk about mentorship at Youth by Youth. We talk about allyship, which is that mutual learning and co-creation and conversation that happens between youth and adults. And we really foster that connection in a number of ways, sometimes through consultancies, sometimes through residencies, if a young person's participating in one of our programs to deepen their practice in another organization, but it's really for that learning of adults of how to better work with and for young people and develop intergenerationality across the field, and youth to develop skills, mindsets, and experience from also older generations. So that's at the core of our programs are those allyships, and underpinning all of those programs is our learning process, which is a simple 3-step journey. What is, what if, what now? What is really the process of sense making and meaning making of what is my experience of education? What is your experience? What are we seeing in our communities? Where are the roots of these challenges? How are they interconnected with your story, my story? What if, how do we radically reimagine new possibilities with and for young people in service of people and planet? And what now? How do we take personal and collective action to do it? So all of our programs are underpinned by that methodology, and we give our youth weavers the tools to lead this process. So all of our programs are led by young people themselves. They facilitate the conversations, and our youth weavers are those facilitators and space holders at both then in partnerships, in in collaborations that we have across the globe, but also especially in their local communities. So all the pictures that you see in the screen are some of those young people that are weaving local hubs, globally supported, locally driven communities where they are bringing together parents, children, community leaders, other school leaders, and out of school youth together in a community to push forward transformation along with other institutions. And that capacity to weave, I don't know what that dinging is, the capacity to weave all these different diverse stakeholders is something that we feel is often removed from the kind of change the world youth leadership kind of energy that we see in some of these spaces. And there's a lot of other great programs that support young people to create projects and do their own thing. But really, we want to help. We think that the main gaps is really that bridging of the separations and divisions that we see in this world and those polarities. And that's where we really want to focus on. I'll just briefly touch on this example with of how in our local hubs, how this kind of manifests into that transformation of education. Lagos, Nigeria is one of our flagship hubs that started 4 years ago. And really the need that they identified is that teachers were entering the profession with little or no training, and also was led by the National Youth Service Corps, which is led by the military, so not really any basis on holistic social emotional learning. And so we co-developed a toolkit with a community-based organization there in Nigeria, and that teacher toolkit and ecosystem of support has now continues to exist in this training program, this national training program, and has been replicated to also other of local hubs like our one in Naka Valley Refugee Camp to really equip young teachers to really lead more inclusive, supportive, relational classrooms. When so far we've established 9 local hubs in Uganda, Kenya, Cameroon, Nigeria, Tanzania, and South Africa, and hoping in the next 5 years to continue to spread to Asia and Latin America, where we have our second most populous youth activists. So we really would love to have a local hub wherever we have young people and adult allies coming together. We are wanting to continue to transform education and into employment. It's like by really acknowledging alternative learning pathways that like Youth by Youth, but also that learning exists everywhere. It's not just in the classroom, it's not just within a school, but really how do we uplift and elevate the skills being built by young people outside of that context, to be able to find and seek out employment, which we've already been doing in many ways by matchmaking our young people graduating through our weavership with organizations around the world. And we are creating a knowledge garden, which is a global online platform that is connecting youth and adults together to learn and share and exchange knowledge. And so this is really to foster more interdisciplinary, intersectional collaboratives in education and seed more of those global hubs that we want to have in the next 5 years. Want to continue uplifting youth stories, and that are visions of that liberated future for all through art and creative media. We want to continue influencing policy. Our local hubs, like the one in Lagos, have had success in that, and we see that like after a 4 or 5 year timeline, there is significant gravitas to push for those larger policy transformations, which is really at the heart of what we want to see is young people at the table with political and system influencers. And of course, why we're here today is really looking at how do we create regenerative resources for young people. And that looks like diversified revenue streams, but also well-being. We partner with psychologists, psychiatrists. There's a community here in DC that have also been a part of our youth mental health program, and really creating that again, holistic community of care within our community has been a big part of what we do, but it's also one of our largest themes in this transformation of education work of youth projects is around the mental health crisis. So regenerative is in all senses, and funding is very much related to that. I already briefly touched on the Knowledge Garden, but happy to dive into it. And the most beautiful thing and my favorite part about this community is those that are part of it, which our core team is all youth-led. These are the people that are currently on our core team, which is really, we want to mirror the communities that we serve. So we're really made, all the young people that you see on the screen came through our programs initially. They are those youth weavers that came through our weavership, co-designer learning festival. We are made up of who we serve. And we're supported by an awesome council of adult allies who we call our Wisdom Council. And that's really been a huge part of our last couple of years, is really building that intergenerational architecture, not just in our programs, but throughout our organization and operations. And of course, collaboration is the way that this work happens. And so there's many partners, people, young facilitators that have come through our community or that are nominated through our community members that we continue to work with, and always open to exploring that. If you have ideas, we love it. So our call for resourcing is really to support all that, but particularly in the next month, by January, in our fifth annual Learning Festival, we're aiming to raise $20,000 to increase the salaries and therefore the capacity and time that that youth team can really dedicate to this work. Cost of living, inflation, the wars and crises that there are have increased, and we just need to increase our budgets, and so that's where our goals are. And then in the next 5 years, we really aim to raise a total budget of $250,000 a year. So that's nearly 1.5 million to increase and scale to those 50 local hubs across in the next 5 years, and all those other goals. The Knowledge Garden, engage 10,000 youth through 100 youth weavers that we build their capacity through the fellowship. So that's our bigger picture goal, but our most immediate goal is just getting us to the point of survivability of this team, and then hoping that we can get to regenerative resourcing by the year ahead, and especially by 2030. And that's a bit about us. And I'm happy to share this out with folks to dive deeper, but thanks for listening, and would love to hear any questions or things to clarify.
A beautiful deck and a lovely presentation. Thank you. Do people have questions or something you want to learn more about? Did we talk about Nakivale? I mean, maybe that's what you wanted to pick up on, Midi, since you're connected to Gloire there. I don't know.
Yes, that was one of my very first questions, was going to be, in Nakavali, are you connected with someone called Gloire Mudakuza, who is leading a permaculture initiative? And he's part of the Co community, but we can certainly put him directly in touch with you. And in that regard, I had another very specific question, which is to ask, I am very connected with a school in Rwanda, which has been growing up from the nursery roots up and is now an extraordinary school in Rwanda. And I don't know whether it's part of your network. I didn't see Rwanda. I saw what might have been Rwanda on the world map, but I didn't see Rwanda in your core team. But if I have particular people that I would want to connect in with you, then how do I do that? That's a question. The other thought is, recently, having listened to one of the big, I think, influencers of our moment, Nate Hagen's interviewing youth, the whole issue of podcasts and how are you connected into the podcast networks, because there must be so many podcasters who can really tell your story, and it is a wonderful, wonderful story that I think will receive widespread support the more it's known about out in the world. So that's a bunch of questions. Gloire, Rwanda, and podcasting.
Yes. Well, that's all super exciting. Why we do not know yet, so please do put us in touch. Yeah, as I said, everything's led through and with our youth. So Rufin Kungwa is our main our lead youth weaver in that Nakivale. in Nakivale, so he might know him already. But I can definitely, we can definitely put him in touch. Your question was how to put people in touch. If any general question, community at youthxyouth.com. That's a great way to join. But also, Zeneb and myself will put our contact details, so reach out to us. And particularly Zeneb in the new year, who can point you in the right direction. So I'm going on maternity leave. But the and then and also on our website, if you put your email to stay in touch through our newsletter and through those channels, also any opportunities come. So for that school in Rwanda, we have young people who are living in Rwanda and do lead projects there. We don't have a hub there, and we don't no one on our core team yet. But it would be awesome to have them. I think the Learning Festival is really a great point of entry to share that opportunity to learn about us and start to anyone who's interested. So if you want to spread the word about that, I think that's a great way for them to join, any connections to join and start to weave into the community. And that's for youth and adults. And the last one was podcasts. Definitely, we would love to be on a podcast. We've had some features here and there. We actually, with one of our youth weavers, have started to plant the seeds of trying to develop our own podcast. We have a blog, but I think this is a key goal of us. Yeah, we've been so in the weeds of doing the work and building the foundation that really amplifying and uplifting the stories in other channels is something that we're really seeking to turn outward in that way in the next year. So if there's um, people that you can uplift us to or connect us with in that respect, like we'd love to. And plenty more people who could prattle on in much more inspiring ways than myself for those podcasts.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I'd love to put you directly in touch with actually the headmaster of the school in Rwanda that I'm thinking of, because he's not just a headmaster, he's actually been totally integrated in the reconstruction of Rwanda. He lost all but 9 members of his 200-member family in the genocide and has rebuilt and has helped to rebuild community in the whole of northwest Rwanda. So he would be a wonderful contact for you for many different connections, I think.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What a true weaver. And it could definitely put us in touch. You just yeah, send an email with me and Zineb on
Yeah.
it.
Yes. I'll get in touch with you afterwards, Zineb.
Yeah. Yes, Akiko.
I'm just wondering, the youth, do you have any age limit?
Yes, that was probably I should have said. We predominantly focus on 15 to 26. And but until the age of 30, they're still considered a youth. And then afterwards, we consider them adult allies. So always can participate, but your role and your contribution slightly change.
Thank you. I just found your Instagram, so I will spread to the
Yes.
people. Yep.
Yeah, I can drop that.
In Sweden, because you don't have anyone from Sweden, right?
How old is Ina in Accra? Of course, she's organizing a whole cohort of young people who are refugees living there. This is a young woman who Akiko knows well and knows her mother, who's doing really beautiful small scale work. It's on our map now too, the Ina house. But how old is she? Do you know?
Mm.
I'm sure she is somewhere late 20.
Late 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
The young people she's working with, like, into this
Yeah,
too.
they are young people, young.
Actually, that reminds me of a question I had, which is who counts as youth?
Yeah, so youth is 15 to 26 for us. But and then until age 30, it's, a flexible youth scale. We have young people who are even younger than 15. Just really is a matter of people's readiness to engage. And then at from age 30 onwards, they're considered adult allies. But we don't have, to answer your question, Akiko, anyone in our core team or even I think ever in our weavership in the past three cohorts that have been from Sweden. So would be
Or
great.
not in Japan either, right?
Not in Japan. No, I think.
Yeah, we've had at the festival people from Japan, but not in the leadership.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's see.
so definitely areas to grow.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So this may seem like an odd question, um, but do you have a succession plan in place? Do you anticipate retiring yourselves at a certain point? And anyone who sort of goes beyond the youth place, how do you
Yeah.
stay? Yeah, I guess the real question is how will you keep it young?
Mm,
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that because we've actually been removing ourselves from most of the operation for the past year, especially since Valentina might have mentioned, but I just had a baby 6 months ago, and so I was on maternity leave and now coming back, and Val is going on maternity leave. So we've been thinking very actively, how do we make sure that it is entirely youth run? That being said, we've also found that young people have lots of transitions in their lives, as it should happen. So we're finding ways to also make sure that we hold the core while letting the team run in the way that they've been for the past year. So it's a fine balance, and we're still experimenting with how much do they need that founder-led kind of energy and how much we can actually step back. But they're already doing 100% of the decision making, and our decision making process has always been youth-led. But we found that at times, especially in times of transitions where young people are going to do master's degrees or PhD in our team, and there's kind of a replacement of who is in our core team, we've needed to be more present. But that to me is also a very interesting learning area of how to manage those transitions in youth-led teams. And Kate?
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to really appreciate what you've been doing, and yeah, it does sound wonderful. I lived in Tanzania for many years, and one of my early specialisms was education and influencing education policy, especially in terms of things like debt relief and the amount of money that gets spent out of the national budget that just goes on servicing international financial institutions. And really an awareness of the kind of the juggernaut of money that is behind conventional education systems and the challenge that makes for you. And I would really love to hear more about how you're able to address that, because I mean, just it links very much with what counts as a youth. In Tanzania, youth policy, it certainly was, I believe it still is. You're still a youth when you're 35. But the dynamic that a person of 35, even a young, inspired person of 35 brings is very different to an out of school youth. And that sense of if only age knew, and if they could somehow keep that passion. I would love to hear more about your experience of really being able to engage those that are from the outside of the system, that the system finds so hard to hear.
Yeah.
Especially because policymakers love to be able to pat you on the head and kind of go, it's lovely what you're doing. It's wonderful, so inspiring. But actually, where are we getting our next bank loan from? So it would be great to hear anything that you've got of the cracks that you've able to open up through that.
Yeah. I think there's many ways to answer your questions. But there's a few things that come to mind for me. The first one is that actually we try exactly to attract the most marginalized people within our community. And the way like that we've been able to do it is notably by giving them internet stipends, because a lot of the time they will find themselves in places where in order to just be able to attend a free program, it costs them quite a bit to be able to attend. So when we have young people in very rural areas in the African continent or in places where without that internet stipend, they would not actually be able to attend, we make sure that this is something that we bridge the gap for those most marginalized young people. And also because we've been kind of advocating for all the different ways that education can happen and the reclaiming of one's own education, I think that we've naturally kind of attracted people who have either left school or been kind of unschooled in some situations, and have wanted to say, like, it's not because I have not, for whatever reason, been able to access education as much, that if I have internet today, that I still have access to education. And so that reclaiming of one's own education is actually quite important in our process. That today we're fortunate to be in a situation where most education resources can be freely available online, and that if given the chance and also given that kind of mindset, that people can actually reclaim that. And the third point is that we're not really kind of trying to create a uniform model of what we're saying needs to happen for the transformation of education, but really focusing on that youth mindset that then tells them, like, you within your community can address whatever problem you're seeing. And we're not here to tell you there's a set of solution or one solution that we're advocating for, but really we're giving you the confidence, the skills or capacity and the community and resources to make your own visions happen, to ask the kind of questions that maybe you've not been encouraged to ask before. So it's really moving out of that model of believing in a set or like limited solution, but actually believing in people, and then empowering these people, not because we're giving them the power in any way, but because we're giving them that sense of belonging and community that makes them feel held as they are engaging in that process of becoming a weaver and change maker within their own communities. So that's why there's so many kind of solutions within our ecosystem, as opposed to like, oh, this is the kind of transformation of education that we as Youth by Youth believe in.
Yeah, and I had to add to that, and I actually, because I gave a talk on this about out of school youth recently, and did a bit of a pulse on, okay, who's out of school or was out of school or been out of school at some point in their lives, and it's about 50% of our community, and due to poverty, um, uh, climate impact of their communities, conflict, and whatever it is, displacement. And the reason why such a key priority for us is really also expanding what it means, what an education means, and expanding beyond the school to the community setting and learning experiences like Youth by Youth to be validated, is because it's not often the solution that a young person returning to a school setting is the best policy, right? Because those schools, they haven't fixed those underlying issues, and you don't address the other issues of poverty and conflict, whatever, it's just going to happen again. And so, how do we actually validate that reclaimed learning of real, tangible, community-based projects, the skills that are developed from living and working in this global way of being a part of a global network embedded within a local community. How do we validate that? And then, we've really been kind of exploring that with also some universities who are willing to kind of take alternative steps and saying, okay, maybe like they've done the education through life, through high school, or even undergraduate. They've already shown them, demonstrated by this, like they're already ready to jump to a master's or PhD now in deepening in that issue. And so there's a bridge to be built for us to not look at these the out of school youth and put the onus of the challenge on them and then make them further removed from the system. But how do we then validate the experience of all that they've learned to cope and be resilient in spite of that, or because of that experience of being out of school, and then allow them to still access that new and changing market of employment, with the support of maybe some traditional institutions that are willing to change as well, like universities.
That's wonderful. I really like that, starting with the most marginalized. And if there's just time for one last question, I'm interested in, do you have any examples of where people in the global north are really learning from that empowerment in the global south? And the reason I'm asking that is, since COVID, in Scotland and also in England and Wales have different education systems, there's been more and more children that haven't gone back to school full time. And in the past, kind of homeschooling was something of a alternative political choice that was made by certain parents. They didn't want their children institutionalized. But now there's more and more that are, sometimes for mental health reasons, a whole range of different children are not going back to school in the same way. And that seems to be a massive challenge to the big institutional ministries of education rolling out, aiming for 95% plus attendance. And I just wonder whether, with the excitement and the exciting things that young people in the global south are doing, there's a connection that can be made for essentially disempowered, marginalized youth in the global north that are seeing through what's being offered to them.
Mm, yes, absolutely. And that's really a lot of what our residency model looks like, where we have our youth weavers who are predominantly from the global south embedded within mostly global north organizations to coach them in that capacity. And one example that's kind of been for many years, even before we had this model, is an experiment, an organization called Big Change, which is based in the UK, and they had this program called Big Education Conversation that is trying to activate young people, particularly marginalized young people in the UK, but also globally, but UK most deeply, around the question, what is the purpose of education? How can it better serve you? And our young people co-created that facilitation guide and how to hold those effective, inclusive spaces with those communities. And now we're really actually helping to build off of that, where they've kind of they're essentially integrating that program within Youth by Youth, to be led by our young people. And so at the global level, but in the UK, that was very much fostered and supported through that relationship. Another one is an organization called Salzburg Global Seminar in Austria that really they bring together, world leaders, system changers in education and in other kind of spaces, in these kind of learning programs, and really incredible programs, but they have quite little representation of global South and youth, and they've noticed that, and so they've been wanting to reconstruct the language, their programs to be more inclusive, even when it comes to giving the time for visas and all this other stuff. Just understanding that. So our young people have been resident weavers within that organization to help them change operationally, to allow for that change. So it looks different for every partner, but it's becoming more and more. It's why we've actually started a consultancy now, for those who are now phasing out of youth, even in our community, and to continue to serve this role in some of these organizations so that they can earn from this exchange, and also that have us as uplifters and coaches in that process to advocate for themselves, because it's that's difficult. The dynamics are still very, very tough to navigate. So yeah, it's yeah, great question.
Thank
And
you so much.
yeah,
It's really
Can I ask a little question? Um, on your homepage, there is no search thing. And I want to look for country group like Ghana, if there are any organization there, how can I find it?
that is why our knowledge garden is being created, because that doesn't exist.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think we should take a page from Ben and Kofundiko's book, maybe to do a bit of a mapping, because that would be really great.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, but it's been on our wish list for a while, and it's now we have an Airtable database, but that's internal, and we can look that up for you and tell you, but it's not, we want something that's more outward facing and people can organically connect and collaborate with each other in the projects that exist. So that's launching in beta version in January. And then we're trying to seek resources to develop the full version. Um, so it's not just like a static, like, I don't know, like image on a screen, or even like filtered database, but something that's more dynamic that we can contribute to also over time as things change. So yeah.
But I'm just wondering, it can be easy to put a search engine somewhere, some simple one. So I could write Ghana and find something.
Yes.
That would be great.
Yeah. I would love, I mean, so if you know people with the technological capabilities to do this, this is one of the roles that we are recruiting. But yeah, I think we're hoping, at least in an early version, is part of that January beta, but it might, yeah, I think that's right. We should have something simple like that.
Well, meanwhile, you can just ask Valentina and Zanab. And I think there's one other email too. So
Yeah.
human intelligence can still, we don't have to replace everything with technology with necessarily to get what we want. And if you're looking for people like that, non-financial resourcing is very much part of what we want to support as well. So any particular, calls for, you're looking for a certain kind of person to do work or connections and things, please let us know.
Awesome. Yes.
I
Yeah, and I
notice
think,
we're at time.
yeah, I know we're at time, but yeah, I did put that on the call for resourcing, non-monetary resourcing support. Just, I'll put that there. Yeah, thank you all for this. I think the invitation, well, I'll pass to Z for a few invitations and then pass back to you, Ben, to close this out.
Yeah, I've been putting them in the chat along the way, but we'd love to see you at the Learning Festival. If you can share it with young people who you think are a good fit for this, that would be really fantastic. Our theme this year is education for the end. We're going to have some very provocative and interesting conversations. We also have small group conversations that are held intergenerationally. So if you feel like you have the space for that, apply to be a host. And I also put the fundraising campaign that we're currently working on, as well as the messaging toolkit, if you'd like to share it with people. As Val said, this is what helps us raise our salaries and make sure that we have the capacity internally to continue doing our work, which, yeah, with inflation and all things, we really need to make sure that young people are actually valued for their work. It's often work that is not well remunerated. That's because it's so hard to fundraise. So any help with that and any ideas you might have, and if you want to discuss more with funders you think might be a good fit or introductions, we'd appreciate any and all of it. Thank you so much for your attention and your very thoughtful questions. I really appreciated the conversation.
Well,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Yeah.
Really, I feel like I've learned so much, and you're such wonderful women. Go, go, go.
I think we can do a post out about this use through the Social Roots platform to our list and try to get that out fairly soon so that it's timely to your fundraising campaign and the festival. And then I think we've started to surface a bunch of non-monetary kind of weaving and connecting opportunities. I have a list of a few more we didn't even have time to get to, but we, we have time to do that and I hope everything goes smoothly and beautifully for you, Valentina, in this next exciting phase in your family's life. Um, and welcome back to Neb. I mean, you've been on leave, and now we get the pleasure of connecting with you. So
Yeah, same. Such a pleasure, seeing you and meeting the people I haven't gotten a chance to meet. Take good care.
Oh, deep gratitude to you and gratitude to Ben for being the focal point that brought us together in the first place. So happy holidays, everybody, and I'll be in touch.